Hi, hello there, welcome back. Let's talk about books. Today I'm going to talk about the worst books I read all year, specifically the worst 5 books. So unfortunately for me, I only made it to, what is my percentage? 80% of my reading challenge on Goodreads this year. I had it set at 50 because last year I read 52 books, and I figured I would make it to 52 books again this year, but I think I spent too much time writing and not enough time reading. I felt like I spent the earlier part of the summer in kind of a reading slump, and I didn't get to read all the books that I had hoped I would get to read. So I am currently sitting at 40 of 50 books, and December's almost over, so I'm not even going to try to make it. I may get through like 1 or 2 more books before the end of the month. We'll see. I am trying to write a bunch of short stories and put them out there, and get into like some short story publications, short horror stories. So again, spending more time writing than I am reading. Shameful, I know. So anyway, let's get into my top 5 worst books of the entire year of 2021. Number 5 on this list, The Snow by Flint Maxwell. I definitely don't hate it, and I did read on in the series. I read 1 or 2 more, maybe it was 1, not 2. Okay, yeah, I read 1 more book in this series, so I didn't hate this book. So what is The Snow by Flint Maxwell? The concept is actually pretty interesting. It's basically a paranormal apocalypse. I don't want to give too much away. I feel like I'm just going to blurt out spoilers. I don't know. Most of these books are old. I don't know if it matters. Okay, there may be spoilers, so I'll try to keep it to a minimum. But if you haven't read these books, I'm sorry if I ruin anything. Maybe I'll get better at that, hopefully. So it starts off with a bunch of people at a vacation getaway. They're out to celebrate 4th of July. Then something really unexpected happens, and all of a sudden the temperature bottoms out. It goes from the heat of the summer to, I think, below 0 overnight, and the snow just comes in buckets and gallons and truckloads and then metric tons, and there's just snow everywhere and it's just piling up, and then a lot of people start dying. The main character and the neighbors, they kind of, what's left of them, they band together to try to survive, and they discover pretty quickly that the snow and the bad weather and the temperatures and stuff is not really the only thing impeding them from escaping. Is this a spoiler? This is a spoiler, okay? There are monsters in the snow. I won't say anything more than that. They try to escape at one point, and they figure out pretty quickly that it's not going to be as easy as just bundling up and trudging through a metric ton of snow. It's going to be a lot more difficult than that. I won't say any more just in case you want to read it. Honestly, I think what really turned me off about it, I feel like this is a very masculine book, like a dude book. Is there such thing as a dude book? I don't know. It just felt like bro speak to me. I think if you're a male reader, you'll probably really connect to the main character, but the main character just felt like such a bro. There's this whole backstory that the main character has, and I don't feel like the backstory factors in unless I forgot, which is entirely possible. Keep in mind always that I'm old and I forget things, so just overlook me if I'm totally wrong about some of this stuff. The main character works for the fire department. He lost somebody in a fire. I feel like that was kind of a cheap way out for his motivation, for his internal flaw. It didn't hold up very well. Maybe he should have been in like a bobsled accident or, you know, something tragic relating to snow. The book's okay. I don't remember the rating I gave it. Definitely not the best book I've ever read, but incidentally, like the last third of this book got really good, and it actually got good enough that I went ahead and read the second one, and I think I forgot everything about the second one. I didn't read the third one, and I don't remember the second one. So take that however you want. I don't know what that means, if that means anything at all. Maybe I just got distracted because I started reading all the Sookie Stackhouse novels. Love them. I don't care if you think they're trashy. I think they're fantastic. Let's move on to number 4. At number 4, I have this book. Let me try not to drop my phone. At number 4, I have this book. Hopefully you can see it. I've got my viewfinder out, so hopefully I can see. And I got it at Walmart for the low price of $7.99, something like that, $7.98. But it is The Haunted by Bentley Little, and it has a really cool cover. There's like hands and stuff on it, creepy hands coming out of like a creepy window. I DNF'd this book. I think I made it, I actually didn't even read the paper copy. I think I read a Kindle version of this book, so I don't know how I ended up with the paperback, honestly, now that I'm thinking of it. I think I read about half of this book. I don't know what this book is about. I couldn't tell you anything that happened in this book. As soon as I read it, it just poof, vanished. I remember that there was like a really awkward sex scene. I don't know, it started off kind of bad. And for some reason I kept reading. The fact that I cannot recall a single detail except for the weird sex scene has to mean something. So yeah, I do not recommend Bentley Little's The Haunted. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, Lullaby by Chuck Palahniuk. A long time ago, one of my friends from high school was obsessed with Fight Club. And I think he was really into Chuck Palahniuk books, and he was always talking about Chuck Palahniuk and Choke and the Fight Club and all that stuff. And I just never was interested in it. I didn't like the Fight Club movie. I've seen it a couple of times, but I didn't really pay much attention to it. You know, obviously Chuck Palahniuk is a very famous author. He's pretty well known. He's one of those recognizable names. I had the opportunity to read Lullaby. I got it from my library app. I read a lot on my library thing through Kindle. I kept thinking, I was like, is this book like 600 or 700 pages long? Is it super long? Because I'm gonna DNF it. I didn't DNF it, but I hated it. And when I say I hated it, there were actually parts of Lullaby that would get really interesting. And I'll tell you, the parts that get interesting are the storytelling parts in between the massive monologue rants. When the book would just get to the parts that were just straightforward storytelling, I would get invested in it. And I think this is why I didn't DNF it. But I would get invested in it, and then it would go back to the huge, monstrous live journal style rants. And I think I even said in the Goodreads review that I'm pretty sure I've seen more cohesive rants from the emo kids on LiveJournal back in the late 90s than what was in this book. I mean, it was a nightmare. But then, there'd be a scene or two that would kind of suck me back in. I don't know. He's overrated. His books are overrated. Admittedly, this is the only one I've read. Somebody said like, oh, that one's not one of his better books. Read a different one. I don't think I will. I think I'm good. Number 2 on my list. Number 2 on my list is The Night Will Find Us by Matthew Lyons. And I was so excited to get to read this book because I had heard good things about it. But I found it to be really nonsensical, and I nitpick, I think, maybe. I don't know if this would be considered nitpicking. But if something doesn't make sense, even if it's like not the most major detail early on in the story, it just throws me out of the story for the whole book. First crack off the bat, a bunch of teenagers are going on a camping trip, but they take one guy with them who nobody likes and everybody thinks is a weirdo. And apparently this kid's done a bunch of weird stuff and nobody's really very comfortable around him. I think I actually DNF'd this one a little over halfway, but right at the very beginning, I'm thinking, why would you take this person into the woods with you if they're a weirdo? And I couldn't get past that throughout the entire book. I kept thinking, I was like, why did they even take this guy? It feels so lazy because also at the very beginning, there's a fight between one of the guys and the weirdo guy. And it's like a really bad fight. And I don't know if this is a spoiler. Probably somebody gets shot. And it's one of those situations where it's like, well, that escalated quickly. I kept reading it because I kept thinking, well, maybe it'll get better. I think I always want to think that it'll get better. It kind of got worse. There was an imaginary friend showed up. From that point on, I started getting so confused that I just couldn't follow the story. DNF'd it, gave it a low score on Goodreads. And I was, well, I did it. And now it's time for number one. Holy shit, buckle up. I hope I can remember, because I read this a few months ago. I hope I can remember all the reasons why I hated this book so bad. So number one is Robert Essig's Stronger Than Hate. Okay, I was really, really, really excited about this one. I got to take a little bit of time to talk about this one, and there's probably going to be spoilers. So I bought the digital version of this, and I sit down to just read a chapter or maybe, you know, just a few pages and just kind of get a feel for it, because I was excited about it because the premise and the hook of this book was insane. When I first started reading Stronger Than Hate, I blew through the first 10 chapters or so in no time. I think that first night, I think I read like a huge chunk of that book all at once because I just could not put it down. So let me kind of tell you what this book is about. There's this old woman who lives next door to this weird guy. It's another weird guy. That's always how the best books start, right? She was a school teacher, so she had apparently made some enemies from teaching, I don't know, degenerates, I guess. I guess some of these kids were absolute bastards. I hope this is not realistic. Do teachers really make enemies like this? I don't know. That's another conversation for another time. She has like a hole in her backyard. I don't remember why she had a hole in her backyard. She fell down in the hole, and the neighbor guy just so happened to not really like her very well. The neighbor guy makes a deal with these two people who really super duper hate this old lady. These two people come over and they start terrorizing this old woman. And the guy next door agrees not to tell because they, you know, some money switches hands and some drugs. So he's gonna basically keep the secret for them and let them do whatever the hell they want to this old woman who's trapped down in the bottom of a hole. There were other people involved, but it basically revolved around two specific people who were doing this to this old woman out of spite and revenge. But they put like a cover over the hole in the backyard and then like a bucket, and then they would poop in it and pee in it and puke in it, and it was horrific the first 1,000,000 times. I was so angry reading this book, and I was so sad, and this is the first time I've ever read a book that made me feel sick to my stomach quite a few times. I was wincing while I was reading it, and then it got to the point where it was like, okay, come on, write something else. Like, okay, you've done that already. Let's do something else. Like, I think that's the first thing that goes wrong in this book, is that you expect it to escalate, but honestly, it goes from 0 to 60 quite literally, in a sense that there's no place for it to go after. But that's at the beginning of the book. But the author did try to somehow make this worse towards the last half of the book, and what he did was so ridiculous. I was like, I almost DNF'd it with just a few pages to go. And this is a spoiler. It takes a weird paranormal turn. So throughout the story, the old woman is kind of relying on memories of her husband and son to get her through this situation, which feels very out of place from the beginning, from the first time that she does it. And honestly, after reading like the first flashback, I think I started skipping them. They just didn't amount to anything. At the end of the book, after the guys turn the house into basically some kind of hellish circus, pretty much, and this is in like a residential neighborhood, and nobody notices that all this crap's going on at this house. This old woman hallucinates her husband, and then all of a sudden she turns into like a zombie monster, and she crawls out of the hole and she kills everybody. I have a theory about what happened to this story. I don't know if I'm right or what. Something's happened to this book along the way. Like, he's had to rewrite it in 3 hours. You know, he's going to do like a year and a half's worth of work this afternoon. I feel like there's an original version of this book somewhere in a drawer that's probably better than this. So that's why it made my #1 spot of the books that I hated this year. And let me tell you what, I was so mad at this book. I hate this book. Okay, so that's it for the worst 5 books that I've read this year. Hopefully you enjoyed this list. Let me know if you've read any of these books and tell me what you thought of them if you have read them, or tell me if you think you might read some of these. I would really love to hear what people have to say about Stronger Than Hate. That would be the one I'm most interested in. So if you've read that, please let me know. And if you haven't, I hope I didn't spoil it for you. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to this channel, leave me a comment, and stick around for more book talk. And until next time, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.